I don't think that there's any escaping the intuitional. I think that ultimately the only thing that can challenge an intuition is a contrary intuition. I very much like W.D. Ross's theory of sort of prima facie duties, and that is that, you know, any felt obligation is a prima facie duty. However, it can be overridden depending on the circumstances by another one. However, that does not mean that the original obligation disappears. It simply means that it's defeasible, and it usually continues to operate in the background. So, you know, if I have an obligation to meet you for lunch, and on the way to driving to meet you, I go past a car accident, and you know, I have to decide whether to save the person inside or meet you for lunch. I'm going to say that, you know, the duty to save the person in the car is overriding, but I'm still going to try to make it up to you. I'm going to apologize. I may buy you the lunch next time as a way of making it up to you, which shows that the initial obligation still operates in the background, even though it was overridden. But I've never, you know, I've never ever heard or seen an example, genuinely speaking, where a theoretical consideration alone, purely on its own, either defeated or overrode a basic intuition. And I partly think that that's just because of the way we are. I mean, I don't think it's possible. Hume thinks.
Well, that's what I started out saying when I said it's not enough for your parents to tell you to stop and smell the roses. It's harder than that, you know. And that's kind of my point. I mean, that is a little Humean in the sense that, as you know, Hume said nothing can oppose a feeling but another feeling, and I agree. And in fact, you know, that gets to, I mean, another thing Hume appreciated was how finely and subtly affect steers cognition and influences behavior. And the reason, you know, you said a meditation retreat's a sterile environment, like a laboratory environment.
It's artificial.
Yeah, it is artificial.
I didn't say sterile.
It's deeply, okay, fine. It's deeply artificial. The whole idea of a serious meditation regime is artificial.
Right.
And the reason I think something that artificial is needed, and the reason I think something as intensive as a meditation retreat may be needed to, if you want to make great progress, is precisely because that's what you are up against. Feeling shapes our thought and convinces us that things are true, whether or not they correspond to objective truth. And given how finely feeling infiltrates thought, it stands to reason, and given the fact that it's, in some sense, maybe hard, right? It stands to reason that it would take a lot of work, a lot of discipline in what is, yes, an artificial environment to make inroads, okay? And
but inroads towards what? I mean, look, I mean, part of what I feel like is underlying all of this, and maybe is that I don't think that, in other words, there's always this sense of sort of, you know, of that things need correction. And that assumes that there is something beyond the reality you're in relative to which we're going to correct it. In other words, I don't think there is anything beyond the social, essentially social reality of selves and reasons and norms and obligations relative to which to correct them. And so that's why I'm always thinking that in reality, really all that can be done is a kind of muddling along, a kind of bootstrapping, a kind of, and what I object to a lot of these sort of systems is that they seem to think that there is some identifiable correct way of things or true way of things or right way of things beyond that we can sort of hold up and say, okay, we need to correct all this messy stuff down here so that we'll get to that point, or so that we'll at least get as close to that point as possible. I don't think there's any such point. I think that there's just the social reality that we live in, and that ourselves and our institutions and our values and everything are constituted out of. And I don't think that there's anything else. And so I just don't see what
so you're not a moral realist.
Oh no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
But you value, you think that, do you think that human welfare has intrinsic moral value?
I don't think anything has intrinsic moral value.
Okay, so you're a nihilist.
Well, I care about things.
You care, but you don't.
I mean, in that sense,
you don't think one should care.
Hume's not a nihilist, and he's a subjectivist about values.
Yeah.
Look. This is. I'm a modern person, right? If I was a pre-modern person, or if I was Alistair McIntyre, who wishes he was a pre-modern person, I could pretend that there were values built into the fabric of the world, of reality. But I don't. I mean, I'm a modern person, and so I think values, inherently, what a value is something mattering to someone, right?
Yeah.
And the shared values are those things that matter to most of us. And I don't think that there's really anything beyond that to measure it against. I don't believe that there's a Platonic realm of forms. I don't believe that there are Kantian obligations that are sort of truths of reason. I just think that there's people and the things that we care about, and then the very intricate, complex social forms of life that we create in order to try and act those things out. And I just don't think there's anything else. You know, and
yeah, I mean, I don't know that I think that there's anything else. One thing I will say on behalf of natural selection is that I think it created value. I think because, for reasons we don't really understand, because complex life involves subjective experience, I think things matter. It's pleasant subjective experience is a good thing. I think
certainly things mattering to people.
They matter to people, and we're the ones doing the talking.
Is naturally evolved. I mean, that seems undeniable. I mean, if we didn't have affective sensibility, things wouldn't matter to us, right? That's clearly true. But I guess that I think that most of the things that we're talking about only exist in their full form as we understand them in a social framework. And I think that 90% of the fruitful understanding of those things comes at the social level of description. I think that the further down you go, the more diminishing the returns are. Obviously, to go down to the quantum physics level would be even more diminishing returns. You get almost nothing out of that. But I think that we actually have really kind of neglected. There's been such a kind of a fetishization of hard science over the last 100 years, and such a desperate desire on the part of social sciences to become more like hard sciences, that I think we've lost out a lot. I actually think we would understand the self an awful lot better with a lot less neuroscience and a lot more Max Weber style social science. I actually think that this is a really bad turn that we took.
Well, I mean, actually, ironically, this is a different argument, but I think, in a way, what you don't like, the turn that you don't like about the social sciences is, to some extent, happened to the extent that they haven't tried to emulate the hard sciences in a way. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think, Weber was an empiricist. I mean, we don't need to get into anthropology and postmodernism and everything.
And there's all sorts of modes of discourse in which that's the way you have to talk about it in order for the discourse to make sense, right?
Exactly.
Where talking about it in the scientific language, so to speak, would make no sense in the kind of conversation you're engaged in, and that's why I think it's important to note that one of the things he says about the manifest image, and I actually think this is at its heart. I mean, people focus on the point about theoretical entities, and I think that's important because I think that is a very distinctive way in which science does its business. And is in some sense defining, but I think that really the more important element of the manifest image that distinguishes it from the scientific one is that the manifest image includes people and their point of view in it.
Yeah.
In other words, it's not just about the world from a neutral description, right? From a neutral vantage point. It's about the world as represented by people. Right? And that's why it's a world that has normativity in it, that has agency in it. In the neutrally described world of science, there is no agency.
That's right.
There is no normativity, and there are no values.
That's right. And I think that's why. But the tension there, I think, comes out still out of the fact that even a lot of scientists, even today in the 21st century, suffer from physics envy. And so the physics has been, since Galileo and Newton, the paragon of science. And yes, it is a great science, it's a great approach to reality, but it is in fact the furthest away from the subjective point of view, from the normative point of view, and so on and so forth. What are getting close, biology gets closer, and then definitely the social sciences get right there. And that's why we have a plurality of sciences. That's why we're not going to do away with social science and reduce it to biology, and then do away with biology and reduce it to physics. It makes that project to me is a non-starter. It makes no sense. Now, let me read what the Stanford says about Sellers and normativity. He says, norms are not reduced away in Sellers' naturalism. And it's important to remember that he is, in fact, a naturalist. You know, he does accept science, the scientific image. He doesn't question it, doesn't reject it. He's not a mysticist. He's not, nothing like that. He accommodates normativity not as a basic, ontologically independent feature of the world, but rather as a conceptually irreducible, indispensable aspect of distinctively human activity that grounds those human activities.